The great council chamber floated in the darkness of space, spinning slowly above the orange glow of Proxima Centauri. Inside, representatives from 43 different species sat in their designated areas, speaking through translators about trade routes and mining disputes. It was a normal day, the kind that happened every week for the past 150 years. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat in the human section, her dark hair pulled back in a simple style. She listened carefully as War Commander Throck slammed his clawed fist on his podium. The reptilian Catharian was angry again, his scales turning a darker shade of red. The Vrex Collective has no right to those asteroids, Throck hissed, his voice making the translator crackle. That sector belongs to the Catharian Empire by ancient law. Across the chamber, the Vrex diplomat Jara pulsed with cool blue light. The crystalline being's voice came through calm and measured. Ancient law written by Catharia, for Catharia. The Council granted us joint access 3 cycles ago. We have done nothing wrong. Council Prime Veltros, the insect-like Archon who led the assembly, tapped his mandibles together in a gesture of frustration. His compound eyes swept across the room looking for a solution. They landed on Sarah Chen. Perhaps, Veltros clicked, our human ambassador might offer perspective. Earth has shown such wisdom in these matters. Sarah stood smoothly and gave a small bow. Thank you, Council Prime. I believe both parties have valid concerns. The Catharian Empire has historical ties to that region, yes, but the Vrex Collective has invested significant resources based on Council approval. Perhaps a shared mining operation with divided profits would satisfy both parties. War Commander Throck snorted. Humans always compromising, always seeking the soft path. Peace is not soft, Commander, Sarah replied with a gentle smile. It simply requires more creativity than war. Several council members made sounds of approval. The Delphinians whistled softly. The Archon delegation tapped their feet in agreement. Humans had been like this since joining the council 150 years ago. Always diplomatic, always calm, always finding the middle ground. Your species is an example to us all, Veltros said warmly. If only others showed such restraint. The session continued for another hour, with small disputes resolved and trade agreements finalized. Sarah participated when asked, always reasonable, always measured. She was good at her job, just like the 30 human ambassadors before her had been good at theirs. As the council prepared to adjourn, an Archon aide rushed into the chamber. The young insectoid's antennae were vibrating with distress. He whispered something to Veltros, who immediately stood. We have received an emergency transmission, the Council Prime announced. A human cargo vessel, the Bright Hope, has been destroyed in the neutral zone near the disputed sector. All 200 crew members are lost. The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to Sarah Chen. They waited to see how humanity would respond to this tragedy. Sarah's face went pale. She gripped the edge of her podium, her knuckles turning white. For a long moment, she said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. How was the ship destroyed? Unknown parties, the aide reported. The vessel's last transmission indicated weapons fire from an unidentified source. Sarah closed her eyes and took a slow breath. When she opened them again, her expression was composed, though something flickered in her eyes that Veltros couldn't quite identify. I call for an immediate investigation, Sarah said firmly, and I request that all parties in the disputed zone withdraw their military vessels until we understand what happened. This was a civilian ship. Cargo haulers and miners should not be targets in anyone's conflict. Very reasonable, Jara pulsed. The Vrex Collective agrees to withdraw. War Commander Throck rumbled in his throat. The Catharian Empire had nothing to do with this, but we will cooperate with the investigation. Thank you, Sarah said. She looked at Veltros. Council Prime, I will need to inform Earth immediately. We have lost 200 citizens. Of course, Ambassador, you have the full support of this council. We will find who did this. Sarah gathered her materials and left the chamber. She walked through the curved corridors of the station, her footsteps echoing on the metal floors. Other diplomats she passed offered sympathetic gestures. A Delphinian touched her shoulder gently with a tentacle. An Archon bowed its head in respect for her loss. She made it to her private quarters before the mask slipped. Sarah sat at her desk and put her head in her hands. 200 people. 200 humans who would never see Earth again, never see their families, never feel rain or breathe fresh air. But she couldn't cry. Not yet. She had a job to do. Sarah activated her communication console and sent a coded message to Earth. The message was simple. Bright hope lost. 200 souls. Investigation ongoing. Maintaining diplomatic posture. The reply came back in less than 5 minutes. Just 3 words. Protocol 7, acknowledged. Sarah stared at those words for a long time. Then she closed the communication and stood. She straightened her jacket and checked her reflection in the mirror. Her face was calm again, professional again. No one would know that her heart was breaking. No one would know what Protocol 7 meant. Back in the council chamber, Veltros sat alone after the others had left. He was troubled by what he had seen in Ambassador Chen's eyes. It wasn't anger exactly. It wasn't even grief, though that was surely there too. It was something else, something that reminded him of old files he had read long ago, back when he was a junior analyst. Files about Earth from before first contact. Files that had disturbed him enough that he rarely thought about them. His personal assistant, a young Archon named Crix, entered the chamber to collect data tablets. Crix, Veltros said slowly, do you have access to the pre-contact observation files? Yes, Council Prime. Which species? Human. I want to review the military assessments from the 50-year observation period. Crix's antennae twitched with curiosity. That's an unusual request. Those files are very old. Is there a concern? Veltros thought about the look in Sarah Chen's eyes, about how calm she had been, about how every human ambassador for 150 years had been exactly the same. Peaceful, diplomatic, reasonable. Perhaps no concern, Veltros said finally, but review them anyway. I want a summary on my desk tomorrow. As you command, Council Prime. Crix left and Veltros sat in the empty chamber watching the stars through the great windows. Somewhere out there, the wreckage of the Bright Hope drifted in the darkness, and somewhere else humanity was receiving news of their dead. The Council Prime wondered what humanity was thinking right now, what they were feeling, and why after 150 years of perfect peace he suddenly felt uneasy. He remembered something from those old files. A human phrase that the observers had noted in their reports. Humans said it often in their entertainment, their literature, their military academies. Speak softly and carry a big stick. The observers had never determined what the stick was. After first contact, when humans proved so peaceful and cooperative, everyone assumed there was no stick at all, that it had been just primitive posturing from a less enlightened age. But watching Sarah Chen's eyes today, Veltros wondered if they had been wrong. He wondered if the stick had been there all along, and humanity had simply chosen not to show it. 2 weeks passed and 3 more human ships disappeared. Each time the pattern was the same. Vessels traveling through neutral space, emergency transmissions cut short, no wreckage recovered. Each time, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before the Council and requested patience, investigation, and peaceful resolution. We trust the Council's commitment to justice, she said after the 3rd disappearance. Earth will not act rashly. We believe in the process. The other species praised humanity's restraint. The Delphinians called them enlightened beyond measure. The Vrex Collective noted that humans demonstrate evolution past primitive violence. Even War Commander Throck, whose own species had lost ships to piracy before, admitted grudging respect. If Catharian vessels had been destroyed, he growled, we would have burned entire sectors by now. Humans are either very wise or very weak. Sarah just smiled her diplomatic smile and said nothing. But she did make one request that seemed innocent enough. Council Prime Veltros, I would like access to the Council's military history databases. Earth wishes to study how other species have handled similar situations in the past. Perhaps we can learn from your experiences. Veltros granted the request immediately. The files were educational material, open to all member species. There seemed no harm in it. What he didn't know was that Sarah spent every night in those databases reading very specific files. She looked up weapons capabilities, fleet movements, response times, and defensive protocols. She made careful notes. She sent coded reports back to Earth every evening, and each report ended with the same phrase: maintaining diplomatic posture. In his own office, young Crix was doing research of a different kind. The task Veltros had given him 2 weeks ago had seemed simple. Review the pre-contact observation files on humanity and provide a summary. But the more Crix read, the more confused he became. The files were strange. They showed a species that fought constantly, that built weapons powerful enough to destroy their own world several times over. The observers had watched humanity nearly exterminate itself on multiple occasions. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, environmental collapse barely avoided. But then, about 70 years before first contact, something changed. The military transmission stopped. Earth's communications became carefully curated. Scientific discoveries, cultural exchanges, philosophical discussions. The observers noted this change but couldn't explain it. One senior analyst had written, "Recommend do not engage. Species may be deliberately concealing military capability. Unknown if they detected our observation. Advise observation only until further assessment." That recommendation had been marked classified, level 9, and apparently forgotten. When first contact finally happened 50 years later, humanity had been peaceful, cooperative, and eager to join the galactic community. Everyone relaxed. The old warnings were filed away and ignored. Crix kept reading. He found tactical analyses of human military doctrine from their pre-contact era. The observers had been impressed and disturbed by human warfare. Humans didn't just fight, they studied fighting like it was a science. They had military academies older than some species' entire civilizations. They wrote books about war, made games about war, told stories about war, and then they just stopped broadcasting any of it. Crix's antennae trembled as a terrible thought occurred to him. What if humans hadn't stopped? What if they had just stopped showing it? He cross-referenced the dates. Earth stopped broadcasting military content 70 years before first contact. But the Council's first observation probe had entered Earth's system exactly 71 years before first contact. They had detected the probe. They had to have. And then they had hidden everything the Council would find scary. Crix needed to tell someone. He gathered his files and rushed to Veltros's office, nearly colliding with a Delphinian diplomat in the corridor. Council Prime. Crix burst into the office without announcement. The humans, we were wrong about them. Veltros looked up from his work, mandibles clicking in irritation at the interruption. Explain yourself, Crix. The observation files, the ones you asked me to review. Council Prime, humans knew we were watching them. They detected our probes and they hid their military capabilities. Everything we saw before first contact was carefully chosen. They wanted us to think they were peaceful. That's a serious accusation, Veltros said slowly. Do you have evidence? Crix spread his tablets across Veltros's desk. Look at the timeline. Look at the transmission patterns. They stopped broadcasting anything military exactly when our probe arrived. And look at these assessments. The observers recommended against contact. They said humans were dangerous. Veltros reviewed the files carefully. His compound eyes took in every detail, every footnote, every warning that had been written and then buried. The more he read, the more disturbed he became. Why would they do this? Veltros asked quietly. Why hide their strength and pretend to be peaceful? Maybe, Crix said hesitantly. They really are peaceful. But they chose it. It wasn't their nature. It was a decision. A decision they could unmake. Veltros finished the thought. They sat in silence, contemplating the implications. 150 years of human diplomacy suddenly looked different. Every compromise, every peaceful solution, every calm response. Had those been choices made from strength, not weakness? An alert chimed on Veltros's console. It was marked urgent. A human colony ship has been attacked, the message read. 3,000 civilians aboard. Ship disabled but not destroyed. Attackers identified as Catharian raiders, unauthorized by Catharian government. Survivors sending distress signals. Get Ambassador Chen here immediately, Veltros ordered. While they waited, another message arrived. This one was from Council intelligence. Multiple human vessels changing course toward the attack site. Fleet composition unknown. Human military transponders active for the first time in recorded history. Crix's antennae drooped with dread. Council Prime, what does that mean? It means, Veltros said quietly, that we're about to see what humans have been hiding. Sarah Chen arrived within minutes. She walked into the office with the same calm expression she always wore, but Veltros could see it now, the control behind that calm. The choice to be peaceful. You summoned me, Council Prime? Ambassador, we've received reports of an attack on a human colony ship. 3,000 of your people. We're preparing a council response. That won't be necessary, Sarah interrupted gently. Earth is handling it. Handling it? Ambassador, with respect, humanity doesn't have significant military presence in that sector. Council Prime, Sarah said, and her voice was still kind, still diplomatic, but there was something new in it now. Something that made Veltros's instincts scream danger. We need to have an honest conversation. May I sit? Veltros gestured to a chair. Sarah sat, folded her hands in her lap, and looked at him with those calm, steady eyes. We thought you knew, she began. When you made first contact, you were so careful with us. Your ships kept their distance. Your diplomats were so polite, so cautious. We assumed you knew what we were capable of and were being respectful of it. We were being cautious because you were unknown, Veltros said. No, Sarah replied softly. You were being cautious because you'd been watching us for 50 years and you were afraid. We saw your probe. We saw all of them. And we realized we were the scary ones. So we made a choice. A choice? To play nice. To show you only what wouldn't frighten you. To prove we could be good neighbors. Sarah leaned forward slightly. And we have been, Council Prime. For 150 years, we've been the best neighbors we could be. We meant every word of every peace treaty. We believed in everything we built here. But, Veltros prompted. But you violated the rules of engagement, Sarah said, and now there was steel in her voice. You, not you personally, but parties within council space, killed our civilians. Multiple times. 3,000 people on that colony ship, Council Prime. Families, children. Ambassador Chen, the Catharian government has disavowed, I know, and will be precise in our response. We're not monsters, Council Prime. We don't punish the innocent. Sarah stood, but the people who did this will answer for it. And everyone will see that humanity has teeth, that we always had them, we just chose not to show them. Ambassador, please let the Council handle this. If humanity acts unilaterally, we already are, Sarah said. She checked her communication device. Our fleets should be arriving at strategic points across the galaxy right about now. Alarms began blaring throughout the station. Veltros's console lit up with incoming reports. His aide's voice came through in a panic. Council Prime. Multiple spatial distortions detected. Unknown vessels dropping out of FTL at 47 different locations. Fleet composition massive. They're human ships, Council Prime. Dozens of them. Where did they come from? Sarah walked to the window. In the distance, a fleet of human vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They were enormous, their hulls bristling with weapons that had never been registered with the Council. They moved with perfect coordination, taking up defensive positions around the station. We've been on exercise, Sarah said quietly, watching her people's ships. For decades, training, practicing, hoping we'd never need to be what we once were. She turned to face Veltros. We'll fix the problem in that sector. We'll be par. The Catharian raiders thought they were being clever. They had disabled the human colony ship and held position, waiting to make demands for ransom. 3,000 civilians were excellent hostages. The raiders sent threatening messages showing weapons pointed at the helpless vessel. What they didn't see were the small satellites drifting near the human mining outpost in the next sector. The satellites looked like standard navigation equipment, the kind every species used to mark mining claims. They'd been there for years. Nobody paid attention to them anymore. War Commander Throck watched the situation from his command ship, furious that unauthorized raiders from his own species had created this mess. He was preparing an official response when his sensors officer made a confused sound. Commander, the satellites near Mining Outpost 7 are activating. What satellites? The human navigational satellites. They're moving. And their power signatures are spiking. Throck pulled up the sensor data. The 6 small satellites had indeed activated. They were rotating, adjusting position, and charging some kind of capacitor system. His tactical computer ran an analysis and returned a result that made his blood run cold. Those aren't navigation satellites, his weapons officer whispered. Those are targeting platforms. The satellites fired. 6 beams of coherent energy lanced through space, covering the distance to the raider ships in seconds. The beams didn't just hit the raiders, they sliced through them. Shields that should have held against anything short of a battleship main gun flickered and failed. Hulls that were designed to withstand sustained combat simply weren't there anymore. 4.3 seconds. That's how long it took for 6 small satellites to completely destroy an entire Catharian battle group. 15 ships, 3,000 raiders gone. The colony ship's hostages were safe. The raiders never got a chance to harm them. Throck stared at the empty space where the raider ships had been. His tactical officer was making distressed clicking sounds. His communications officer had stopped moving entirely, frozen in shock. "Get me the council," Throck said quietly. "Get me the council right now." The emergency session assembled faster than any in council history. Representatives arrived in various states of shock, confusion, and fear. The chamber buzzed with panicked conversations in 43 different languages. Veltros called for order, his mandibles clacking sharply against his podium. "We have all seen the reports. Human weapons platforms destroyed unauthorized Catharian raiders. War Commander Throck has requested this session to address the situation." Throck stood, and for the first time in his career at the council, he looked uncertain. "I wish to formally state that the Catharian Empire did not authorize those raiders. They acted against our laws and our honor. They got what they deserved." "The question," Jara pulsed, the Vrex diplomat's crystalline body flickering with agitated orange light, "is where did human weapons come from? Those satellites were registered as navigation equipment. They've been there for 6 years. Perhaps," suggested a Delphinian representative, "we should ask the humans directly?" All eyes turned to the chamber entrance as Sarah Chen walked in. She looked exactly as she always did, professional, calm, slightly apologetic for any inconvenience. She took her position at the human podium and waited patiently for the room to quiet down. "Ambassador Chen," Veltros began carefully, "the council requires explanation. Those weapons were not registered. They were disguised as civilian equipment. This is a violation of council regulations." "With respect, Council Prime," Sarah replied, "we never said they were civilian equipment. We registered them as satellites." "Which they are. We simply didn't specify what kind of satellites. No one asked. But you allowed us to believe, and we allowed you to assume," Sarah corrected gently. "There's a difference. We never lied to the council. We just didn't volunteer information that might make everyone nervous." A small Archon delegate stood up. "How many of these weapons platforms do you have?" Sarah paused, seeming to consider her answer. "All of them. All of..." "What?" "All of our stations. Mining outposts, research facilities, communication relays, cargo transfer points. Every single installation humanity has built outside of Earth has defensive capabilities." Sarah looked around the chamber. "We thought you knew. We thought that was obvious. Why would we build undefended structures in space? Because that's what the regulations require." Jara's light flashed angry red. "Civilian stations must be civilian." "Our stations are civilian," Sarah said patiently. "They're staffed by civilians. They serve civilian purposes. They just happen to also be able to defend themselves. Earth believes in practical design." War Commander Throck surprised everyone by laughing, a harsh barking sound. "I understand now. Humans are not peaceful. They are polite. There is a difference. A crucial difference. We are peaceful," Sarah insisted. "We genuinely prefer peace. But we're not helpless. We never were." Veltros felt the weight of command pressing on him. "Ambassador Chen, the council must know. What else haven't you told us?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Council Prime, with respect, may I share my screen?" Veltros authorized it, and Sarah's data appeared on the main display. The chamber fell into shocked silence as the information scrolled past. Every human cargo ship had concealed weapons. Not defensive weapons, actual military-grade offensive systems. The cargo containers could flip open to reveal missile batteries and beam weapons. Every human civilian station had enough firepower to fight off a full battle fleet. The mining equipment could be repurposed as mass drivers. The solar panels could focus into laser arrays. Human colony ships weren't just transports. They were mobile fortresses that could deploy, establish a foothold, and hold territory against significant military opposition. And the fleet. "Oh, the fleet. 47 fleets," Sarah said quietly as the data displayed, each one comparable in size to the Catharian Empire's entire navy. They've been on training exercises in deep space for decades, rotating crews, maintaining readiness, hoping they'd never be needed. "This is impossible," Jara pulsed weakly. "The resources required, the industrial capacity." "Earth is very industrious," Sarah said simply. "We just didn't show you our military industries. We showed you our art, our culture, our science. The nice things. The things that wouldn't make you afraid." A small voice came from the Delphinian section. Why hide all this? Why not just tell us?" Sarah's expression softened. Because we saw your probe. The first one, 70 years before first contact. It was shaking. Did you know that? Your observation probe's position-keeping thrusters were firing erratically, because whoever was controlling it was nervous. You were watching us destroy ourselves with weapons that could barely crack a moon, and you were terrified. She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes with representatives from dozens of worlds. So we looked at ourselves through your eyes, and we realized we were the monsters in this story. We were the scary species, and we made a choice. What if we didn't have to be? We spent 50 years cleaning up our act before first contact. We didn't become less capable. We became more careful, more considerate. We learned to hide the weapons and lead with the poetry. And when you finally came to talk to us, you were still so careful, so diplomatic, so clearly relieved that we weren't as bad as you feared. Sarah smiled sadly. We thought we'd done well. We thought we'd proven ourselves. We thought you understood that we had teeth but chose not to bite. Instead, you thought we never had teeth at all. Veltros felt something between awe and horror. 150 years. You maintained this deception for 150 years. It wasn't deception, Sarah said firmly. Every peace we made, we meant. Every treaty we signed, we honored. Every friendship we built, we cherished. All of that was real. The only deception was letting you think we couldn't be anything else. And now? Throck asked. Sarah's expression hardened just slightly. Now people violated rules of engagement. They killed our civilians. That changes things. The raiders have been destroyed, Jara pointed out. The raiders, yes, but the larger issue remains. Someone thought they could attack human civilians without consequences. Someone thought we were soft targets. Sarah's voice was calm, but there was something final in it. We need to correct that misunderstanding. Permanently. What are you going to do? Veltros asked, dreading the answer. What we should have done at the start, show you who we really are. All of it. The peace and the capability. The kindness and the teeth. Sarah's image changed, showing fleet positions across the galaxy. Those 47 fleets are currently positioned at strategic points. They're not attacking anyone. They're not threatening anyone. They're just visible, no more hiding. This will cause panic, Veltros said. Probably, Sarah admitted. But it's necessary. The Council needs to understand what peace with humanity actually means. It means you have neighbors who could burn the galaxy, but would rather plant gardens. It means you have allies who could crush any threat but prefer to negotiate with them. It means you're safe. Safer than you've ever been. Safe? A Delphinian delegate squeaked. You. War Commander Throck had been a soldier his entire life. He had fought in 12 major campaigns and countless smaller conflicts. He understood warfare the way a fish understands water. It was his natural environment. He knew how battles worked, how strategy developed, how armies moved. Watching the humans operate, he realized he knew nothing at all. The Catharian Empire, faced with unauthorized raiders bringing shame to their name, and now a human military response had mobilized their fleets. Not to fight, Throck wasn't that foolish, but to contain the situation, to show they were handling it internally. The humans destroyed 60% of those fleets in 72 hours. They didn't do it the way any council species would. There were no grand battles, no glorious engagements. Human ships simply appeared, struck with devastating precision, and vanished before Catharian forces could respond. They targeted command vessels, supply lines, and communication relays. They didn't kill ships, they neutralized them. Weapons offline, engines disabled, life support intact. It was surgical, clinical, and absolutely terrifying. They're not fighting us, Throck's tactical officer said, studying the patterns. They're dismantling us. What's the difference? Throck growled. A fight has back and forth, attack and counterattack. They're taking apart our fleet like a child's toy. Piece by piece, Throck watched the tactical display update. A Catharian supply convoy had just been intercepted. Not destroyed, just stopped. The human ships had disabled every vessel's FTL drive with single precise shots, then jumped away. The convoy was stranded but safe, their crews unharmed. They could have killed them, Throck said quietly. Every engagement, they could have killed everyone. They're choosing not to. Why? Because they're proving a point. They want us to know they could end this in an hour if they wanted to. They're being merciful, and somehow that's more terrifying than if they were just destroying us. A communication request came through. Throck almost laughed. It was the humans asking for a diplomatic channel. They were systematically crushing his empire's military response, and they still wanted to talk. He accepted the call. A human admiral appeared on screen, an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She saluted. War Commander Throck. I am Admiral Liu of the Human Defense Fleet. I'm contacting you to offer terms. Terms? You haven't stopped shooting at us, and we won't until you stand down completely. But War Commander, we're not interested in continuing this. We have no quarrel with the Catharian Empire. We have a quarrel with the raiders who killed our civilians. Those raiders are dead. Your satellites destroyed them. Yes, but the larger issue remains. Enforcement of rules of engagement, ensuring this never happens again. Admiral Liu leaned forward slightly. We're proposing that Catharian Empire formally acknowledge the attack, participate in a truth and reconciliation process for the civilian deaths, and work with the Council to ensure proper chain of command over military forces. Throck felt his scales flush with shame. You want us to admit failure in front of the entire Council. We want you to acknowledge reality. Your empire lost control of rogue elements. They committed war crimes. You need to own that and fix it. Admiral Liu's expression softened slightly. War Commander, humanity doesn't want to humiliate the Catharian Empire. We want to make sure this never happens again. Not to us, not to anyone. And if we refuse, then we'll continue degrading your military capacity until your government decides to negotiate. We can do this for months, War Commander. Years, if necessary. We've been practicing for longer than your empire has existed. She paused. Or you can talk to Ambassador Chen and the Council today. Agree to reasonable terms and we all walk away from this. Your choice. Throck looked at his tactical display, at the fleets being methodically disabled, at the perfect precision of human operations, at the complete absence of Catharian success in countering them. I will speak to the Council, he said. Good choice. Admiral Liu out. While the military situation resolved itself, Veltros and Crix were buried in the archives, trying to understand how they had gotten everything so wrong. The files painted a terrifying picture. Pre-contact humanity had been brutal. They fought wars that killed millions. They developed weapons that could sterilize planets. They had come within moments of destroying themselves multiple times. But the files also showed something else. Humans studied war like it was an art form. They had military academies that ran for centuries. They wrote books analyzing every battle they'd ever fought, learning from every victory and defeat. They made games to teach tactics. They told stories glorifying warriors while also showing the cost of war. They remember, Crick said, reading through a tactical analysis. Every species forgets. We have peace for a few generations and we forget how to fight. Humans never forgot. They just stopped doing it. Veltros looked at his young aide. How do you know they stopped? Maybe they just stopped where we could see. They found evidence supporting that theory. Human entertainment was full of war. Their movies showed massive battles. Their games simulated combat. Their books told stories of soldiers and strategy. Every human child grew up with these stories, these lessons, these reminders. It's cultural memory, Veltros realized. They made sure every generation understood what war was, what it cost, and how to fight one. Just in case, Crix repeated. Just in case they needed to be wolves again. A message arrived for Veltros. It was from Ambassador Chen requesting a private meeting. He accepted, and she arrived within the hour. Sarah looked tired. There were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there before. She sat across from Veltros and just looked at him for a long moment before speaking. Council Prime, I owe you an explanation. You owe the Council several explanations. Ambassador. Fair enough. Sarah managed a small smile. Would you like to know why I volunteered for this position? Veltros clicked his mandibles in agreement. My grandmother was a peacekeeper during the resource wars. That's what we called the conflicts that almost destroyed Earth in the late 21st century. Fighting over water, over rare minerals, over land as climate change made some areas uninhabitable. Sarah's voice was soft. She spent 40 years negotiating peace, building agreements, creating systems where people could resolve conflicts without killing each other. She sounds remarkable. She was. And she taught me something important. Peace isn't natural. It's built. It's maintained. It requires work and will and constant attention. Sarah looked at her hands. When we detected your observation probe, Earth's governments had a choice. We could show you what we were, warriors who had finally learned better, or show you what we wanted to be, a peaceful species worthy of joining the galaxy. So you lied. No, Sarah said firmly. We became what we showed you. Every human who joined the diplomatic corps meant it. Every peace treaty we signed was genuine. Every compromise we made was real. We didn't lie about wanting peace. We just didn't mention we were also really, really good at war. Why not? Why not just be honest? Sarah laughed, but it was a sad sound. Because you were terrified of us, Council Prime. Your probe was shaking, and we realized if we showed up at first contact with our teeth bared, you'd never trust us. You'd always see us as the dangerous species, the ones to watch, the ones to fear. Instead, you hid. Instead, we built trust. For 150 years, we proved we could be good neighbors, good allies, good friends. Sarah met his eyes. And we are. That's real, Council Prime. Our friendship with the Council, our commitment to peace, it's all real. But you have teeth. Yes. And now everyone knows it. And I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry we had to show you this way. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. We wanted to protect you from ever having to see the other side of humanity. The side that knows how to wage war. Your grandmother would be proud, Veltros said quietly. You maintained peace for as long as possible. She'd be disappointed we had to show the teeth at all. Sarah stood. War Commander Throck is ready to negotiate. The Catharian Empire will formally acknowledge what happened and participate in a reconciliation process. Is that acceptable to the Council? Yes, I believe we can work with that. Good, then I'll recall the fleets. Most of them, anyway. A few will remain visible, just as a reminder. A reminder that humanity has teeth. A reminder that humanity chooses not to use them, Sarah corrected. There's a difference, Council Prime. There's always been a difference. After she left, Veltros sat alone in his office. Crix found him there an hour later, staring at the human fleet positions on his display. Council Prime, are you well? I'm thinking, Crix, about fear and respect, about how we confused weakness with peace. Veltros turned to his aide. We saw what we wanted to see. Humans led us, and maybe that was kind of them. Maybe it was manipulative. Perhaps it was both. What do we do now? Now? Veltros looked back at the display. Now we work with the truth. Humanity is peaceful because they choose to be, not because they have to be. They're our friends because they want to be, not because they need us. And that might actually make them the best allies we could have. Because they could destroy us but won't. Because they're strong enough to choose mercy, Veltros said, and wise enough to know that strength without restraint is just another kind of weakness. On Earth, in a small apartment in Geneva, an old woman watched the news broadcast from 6 months had passed since what the Council now called the Revelation. The galaxy had adjusted, though not without difficulty. Trade routes had been redrawn. Defense agreements had been renegotiated. Every species had to reconsider what having humanity as neighbors actually meant. The Council chamber had changed too. There was a new position in the organizational structure, Peacekeepers of Last Resort. It was occupied by a single chair, Ambassador Sarah Chen's chair. She sat in it now, listening to a dispute between two minor species over fishing rights in a shared ocean world. It was the kind of small conflict that used to take months to resolve. Now, with everyone aware that humanity was watching, both sides were being remarkably reasonable. We propose a seasonal rotation, the Caloran representative suggested, 6 months for each species with shared monitoring stations to ensure compliance. That is acceptable, the Telmari diplomat agreed, tentacles curling in reluctant approval. We can work with this. Veltros clicked his mandibles in approval. Excellent. This dispute is resolved. Ambassador Chen, do you have any concerns? Sarah smiled. None at all, Council Prime. I'm pleased to see such practical solutions. She was pleased, genuinely. This was how it was supposed to work. The threat of force making everyone more willing to compromise. Peace through deterrence. She hated that it required the threat, but she couldn't deny it was effective. After the session, several representatives approached her. This was common now. Species wanted human military advisors, not to build weapons or plan conquest, but to learn what humans called strategic restraint. Ambassador Chen, a Delphinian admiral, approached, bowing respectfully with 2 of its tentacles. My government has authorized me to request human assistance with our Defense Academy curriculum. We wish to learn your methods. Wait, what methods specifically, Admiral? How to be strong enough that others don't test you. How to maintain capability without becoming aggressive. How to... The Delphinian paused, choosing words carefully. How to have teeth without biting. Sarah felt a warmth in her chest. This was what they'd hoped for. I'll connect you with our military education corps. They have programs designed exactly for this. Thank you, Ambassador, and I wanted to say personally that I understand now. What your people did, hiding your strength so we wouldn't fear you. That was a kindness, we thought so. Not everyone agrees, perhaps not. But you gave us 150 years of genuine peace. And when that peace was violated, you restored it without unnecessary bloodshed. That speaks to character, Ambassador. That speaks to who humanity truly is. After the Delphinian left, War Commander Throck approached. The Catharian had changed in 6 months. He was quieter, more thoughtful. The truth and reconciliation process had been hard on his species, forcing them to confront failures in their military command structure. But they'd emerged stronger. Ambassador Chen, I wanted to inform you that the final recommendations from the Reconciliation Commission have been approved. Catharia is implementing new oversight protocols for all military operations. That's excellent news, Commander. It was necessary. We were sloppy, arrogant. We allowed rogue elements to operate because we didn't think anyone would challenge us. Throck's scales shifted to a darker, more serious color. Your people taught us humility. That's a rare gift from a conqueror. We're not conquerors, Commander. No. You're something more dangerous. You're teachers. You make us look at ourselves and question whether we're living up to our own ideals. He gave what passed for a Catharian smile. My government would like to invite human observers to our military academies. We want to learn your methods of training warriors who understand restraint. I'll arrange it. And, Commander, thank you for taking responsibility, for choosing the harder path. Throck nodded and left. Sarah stood alone for a moment, watching the various species mingling in the chamber. They were more respectful toward each other now, more careful, more aware that violence had consequences. Was this peace, or just better managed fear? She didn't have an answer. That evening, Sarah had dinner with Veltros in one of the station's observation lounges. It had become a tradition, these informal meals where they talked about everything except politics. Tonight, though, politics came up anyway. The council is voting next week on the formal structure of your new role, Veltros said, picking at his food with his mandibles. There's been discussion about what to call it. Some want Guardian Forces, others suggest Peace Enforcement Division. What do you think? Sarah asked. I think, Veltros said carefully, that we should call it what it is. Humanity has become the adult in the room, the species that others look to when situations get dangerous. Not because you're more evolved or more righteous, but because you remember what real violence looks like and you've chosen to prevent it. That's a lot of weight to carry. Yes, I've wondered if it's fair to put that on your species. You came to us seeking friendship and we've made you our guardians instead. Sarah was quiet for a moment, looking out at the stars. You know what my grandmother used to say? The strong have a responsibility to the weak, not to rule them, not to control them, but to protect them from those who would. Your grandmother sounds very wise. She was. She lived through hell to build something better, and she taught me that peace isn't the absence of strength, it's the choice not to use it. Sarah turned to Veltros. So yes, it's a weight, but it's one we'll carry, because that's what friends do. Friends, Veltros repeated, even after we misjudged you, even after we assumed the worst and the best at the same time, especially then. You saw us at our worst in those old files. You saw what we were capable of becoming, and you still gave us a chance at first contact. You could have just avoided Earth, marked us as dangerous and left us alone, but you believed we could be better. Were we right to believe that? Sarah smiled. We're still here, aren't we? Still talking instead of fighting, still building instead of destroying. I'd say you were right. They finished dinner in comfortable silence, two very different beings who had learned to understand each other. As Sarah prepared to leave, Veltros stopped her with a question. Ambassador, may I ask something personal? Of course. Do you ever resent it? Having to hide your true nature for so long? Watching humans be seen as weak when you knew the truth? Sarah considered the question. Sometimes, but then I think about the alternative. If we'd shown up at first contact with all our weapons visible, all our military might on display, how would that conversation have gone? Poorly, I imagine. We would have had peace, probably. But it would have been peace through fear. You would have agreed to things because you were afraid not to. Every treaty, every agreement, every friendship would have been tainted by that fear. Sarah looked at him directly. This way we built real relationships first. Real trust. And when you finally saw the teeth, you already knew our character. You knew we were choosing not to bite. That's remarkably strategic thinking. It's remarkably human thinking. We've always been good at long-term planning, especially when it comes to warfare. Sarah grinned. And yes, we consider diplomacy a form of warfare, just with words instead of weapons. Later that night, Sarah returned to her quarters and activated her communication console. A familiar face appeared on the screen, her daughter, now 8 years old, beaming with excitement. "Mommy, I saw you on the news. You were talking to those aliens with the sparkly bodies." "Hi, baby." "Yes, that was me talking to the Verrex. How was school?" "Good. We learned about the resource wars today. Teacher said great-grandma helped end them." "Is that true?" Sarah's heart clenched. "Yes, sweetie. Your great-grandmother was a very brave woman who worked very hard for peace. Teacher also said that we have to be ready to fight, but we should never want to. She said that's what being human means now. Is that true too?" "Yes, baby. That's exactly right. We have to be strong enough to protect people, but kind enough that we don't want to hurt anyone." Her daughter's face scrunched up in thought. "That sounds hard." "It is hard. It's the hardest thing, but it's important." "Is that why you had to show everyone the scary stuff? So they'd know we can protect them?" Sarah felt tears prickling at her eyes. Her daughter understood. This 8-year-old child understood what some council members were still struggling with. "Yes, baby. Exactly that. Sometimes you have to show your teeth so nobody makes you bite. Are we still playing nice?" "Always, sweetie, always. That's who we are. That's who we choose to be." "Okay. I love you, Mommy. I love you too, baby. So much." After the call ended, Sarah stood at her window looking out at the human fleet ships in the distance. They were different now, no longer trying to look like civilian vessels. Their true nature was visible. Weapon systems displayed, military configurations clear. But something else was visible too. Each ship had painted on its hull the human diplomatic corps symbol, an olive branch and a shield intertwined. A promise and a protection, choose peace, but be ready for war. That was humanity now. That was what they'd become. Not conquerors or pacifists, but something in between. Something